You'll be shocked when you hear my passionate story, and there are some big surprises waiting for you at the end of the video. I can't wait to tell you. Let's get started. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah. I'll never forget the day I stepped into the strangest time of my life. Sometimes when I think about it, I ask myself, did this really happen? My husband David is a very hard-working man, but unfortunately his attention to me had decreased a lot compared to the love I once felt. In our backyard, we have a horse named Max who shines under the sun and walks with grace. At first, I saw him just as a cute animal, but over time he started to take an unexpected place in my life. His big, muscular body would sometimes take over my mind when I was searching for something to fill the emptiness inside me. In his eyes, I found a depth that could touch a person's heart. But of course, it wasn't easy to understand where these feelings were coming from. I was carrying a secret that would shock many people. I was trying to deal with the complex emotions that went back and forth between David's indifference and Max's attraction. But I wasn't ready for any of this. Not at all. Now I'm ready to share these secrets and feelings inside me. But this journey will require much more. This story will affect you deeply. You'll be shocked. At first, the time I spent with Max was just a way to relax. I would take walks with him in the garden, sometimes pet him, sometimes just stare at him and get lost in my thoughts. But one day, when I was petting Max, the depth of the feelings I experienced overwhelmed me. In that moment, it felt like a reflection of the loneliness inside me. When David came home from work, he was usually exhausted, and his interest in me and our home kept fading. It wasn't like when we first met. It felt like we were strangers living in the same house. Being by his side often turned into disappointment. But Max, he was the complete opposite. Every moment I spent with Max made me feel the love I needed to survive. One evening, as the sun was setting, I sat next to Max. The wind gently brushed his fur, and I started questioning how my feelings for him were changing. In that moment, I felt something shift in my heart. Max's muscles showcased his power and majesty, while in his eyes, I found a sense of security, as if he understood my loneliness. With these thoughts swirling in my mind, my attachment to him grew stronger every day. He wasn't just an ordinary animal anymore. He had become a presence in my life that filled a void. Although I tried to suppress my feelings, at some point, I was going to have to figure out what I truly felt for Max. But I had no idea the storm this situation was going to create in my life. All these developments were about to drag me into a deep darkness. One evening, as I sat with Max in the stable, watching him, the depth of the feelings I had for him led me into a whole new line of thinking. Max's muscular body and graceful movements drowned out the voice of my loneliness, intensifying my attraction to him. His eyes were deep and full of meaning. It felt like they could reach into the darkest corners of my soul. At that moment, I heard David's voice coming from the distance as he returned home. My heart started racing. I had to make a choice. As David entered the house, as tired as usual, he had left me alone with Max. In that moment, I was overwhelmed by deep confusion about what was right and what was wrong in my life. Max, beyond being just an animal, had become my confidant. The strong bond between us was filling the gap that David's indifference had left. But I had to face the reality of this situation. When David came over to us, the exhaustion and indifference on his face only pushed the distance between us further. The emptiness I felt toward him deepened my connection with Max, and the internal conflict within me was growing. The warmth I felt with Max was something I couldn't find in David's presence. That evening, the time I spent with Max had gone beyond just being a source of relaxation for me. My feelings for him were pulling me into a deep darkness, and I was getting swept up in it, not knowing where this was all going to end. Every day I fought not to lose myself, but at the same time, how could I deny the deep connection Max was providing me? As the chaos in my heart grew, I was struggling between David's indifference and Max's attraction. It was making me feel like an unexpected storm was on the horizon. One weekend, I went on a morning walk with Max. As the first rays of sunlight painted the garden in golden hues, I felt peaceful, but also incredibly conflicted. Every moment I spent with Max was like an escape from the real world, but there was a voice inside me. I knew these feelings were wrong, but in that moment, when I looked into Max's eyes again, I gave in to the emotions inside me. When I was with him, it felt like the world stopped. Max's strong body continued to pull me in. The texture of his fur gave me a sense of security I had lost. I stayed by his side for a little longer, petting him and relaxing while looking at him. But that morning, everything was about to change. Just then, I heard car noises in the distance. It was David's car. I jumped up instantly, a wave of panic surging through me. I quickly stepped back from Max, but something caught my attention. As David was pulling his car out of the garage, he looked directly at me. His eyes suddenly sharpened, and he turned toward the garage. My heart raced as I looked down and held my breath, hoping things wouldn't escalate. I heard David's footsteps approaching. I wanted to take one last look at Max, but it was too late. David stopped right in front of the garage door, staring at me in utter shock. "What's going on here? What is this?" he shouted, his voice trembling with anger and confusion. His expression was filled with disbelief. "What were you doing out here, with the horse?" His words hit me like a wall. The guilt within me suddenly overwhelmed me. In that moment, I realized the time I spent with Max had been about more than simple relaxation. But David's reaction felt like a harsh wake-up call. "What were you thinking?" he shouted again. "How did things get like this? Here, with the horse?" These were words I'd never imagined hearing. David's frustration grew more intense with every passing second. In that moment, I felt a void in my heart. David's shock and anger made me feel like everything was falling apart. I stayed silent for a moment, not knowing what to say. How could I explain? I hadn't found the attention and companionship I'd wanted from David, but with Max, I'd felt a different connection. And now, it seemed like all of it was coming to light. David's shouting brought out every emotion within me. He was so upset that I couldn't tell what he was thinking, or what he might do. In that instant, it felt like my whole world was slipping away. "How did I even marry you?" he screamed. "How could you belittle and humiliate me like this? What does it mean to be with the horse? How disgusting you are!" David's words stabbed into my heart like knives. His anger toward me was forcing me to accept that my deep attraction to Max and this relationship couldn't coexist. But all I felt in that moment was emptiness. David's anger kept rising with each passing minute. "I'm selling Max!" he suddenly yelled. "You'll never see him again. I'm taking that filthy animal away from you." At that moment, something inside me shattered. Losing Max was incredibly painful, but I also knew it was impossible to fix this relationship. David grabbed his car keys angrily and stormed toward the garage. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop Max from disappearing. For a few days, David sold the horse, and I was left with nothing but an empty garden. In the mornings, I couldn't hear Max's strong footsteps following me. I couldn't see those determined eyes or the graceful movements of his muscular body. Losing him shook me to the core. But somehow, I had to find out where Max had gone. For days, I searched for Max at every opportunity. I thought he might be in a village, maybe on a farm. But no matter where I went, I couldn't get any information about him. Whenever I asked people, they just shook their heads and walked away. Finding Max became an obsession. At night, I thought about the hours we'd spent in the barn, him waiting for me. But with each passing day, finding him became more and more impossible. And then the day came. I couldn't find Max. I wouldn't find him. He had left me. All that was left was a lost love and a broken heart. After that moment, David and I became even more distant from each other. The divorce process was heavy and painful for both of us. There had been so much built-up anger and hurt that it never went away. David wanted to take his life in a different direction, and I kept pushing harder every day to find Max. But in the end, the divorce was finalized, and everything in our home officially ended. David packed his things without saying a word and left the house. All that remained were the memories. The man I once loved, but had become a stranger to me, and the Max I had lost. After that time in my life when everything changed, a void remained. Losing David didn't mean much to me, but losing Max truly shook me. Every day I continued to search for him. I didn't know where he was, but deep inside, I still held on to the hope of finding him. One day, maybe somewhere, somehow, I would find him. There was such a deep connection that I didn't want to believe he was really gone. Every morning when I woke up, I couldn't stop thinking about Max. His body shape, the depth in his eyes, his movements. I imagined one day reaching him and being by his side again. But I don't know. Will I be able to do that? And now, that animal's absence still grows inside me like an open wound. That horse who once gave me trust and made everything feel right. Now just a lost memory. Before I can finish my search for Max, I don't even know if I'll be able to rebuild my life. This story ends here, but I'm still out there, continuing to search for Max.